Hello and thanks for watching. This video is intended for you if you are new to flying VFR on Vatsim UK. We're going to do a couple of circuits at Liverpool in the UK. There is currently Liverpool radar online, so he'll be our controller. There's no ground or tower. It's going to be a kind of a discussion about the ATC interaction, why we say what we say, what responses you can expect. And we'll take along a copy of CAP 413 and the Skyway Code for reference. In the previous video, we looked at sources of information for getting ready for a flight on Vatsim UK. And for this flight, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do an internet search for Vatsim Echo Golf Golf Papa, which is the ICAO code for Liverpool, and follow the link to the Vatsim UK webpage. Now this gives us lots of useful information about the aerodrome, and it gives us the information that a controller will expect you to know. So we see at the top the METAR for the aerodrome that Vatsim is currently using, and that's not always the same as current real-world weather. There's sometimes a section on VFR flying, in this case there is, and there's also a little bit of information about circuit flying. Further down in the chart viewer, we need to get a copy of the aerodrome chart. So this is the GA apron at Liverpool. Now, in the real world, the GA apron here is actually outside of the licensed aerodrome. So technically, a private pilot in the GA apron is free to start up and taxi as they wish, and only has to ask for permission once they get to Kilo. But we're going to ignore that for this flight, and we're going to start up just as we would do on a regular aerodrome. In the pilot client, I'm going to look up the frequency for the Liverpool radar service and the Liverpool ATIS. If you don't know already, you can right-click on the ATIS and request the controller info, and this will give you the text version. That's not very realistic though, so let's get the audio version as normal.
And 120 degrees, visibility 10 kilometers or more, few clouds at 3,500 feet, temperature +18, dew point +11, QNH 1022, threshold QFE 1019. Acknowledge a receipt of information hotel and advise aircraft type on first contact. Liverpool Information Hotel, time 1120, runway in use 27, transition level flight level 60, surface wind 080, 8 knots varying between 060 and 120 degrees, visibility 10 kilometers or more, few clouds at 3,500 feet, temperature +18.
You'll notice that although the wind is from the east, the departure runway is to the west, and this is because there is a preferred runway at Liverpool, which means that as long as the wind isn't too strong in the wrong direction, you'll be sent off to depart to the west. So with this preparation done, we now know the runway in use, the QNH, what circuit height we will be given for the circuits, and what squawk we are to expect. So now let's call into ATC. At the moment we've just got Liverpool radar online. That means he's acting as radar and tower and ground controller. So I'm going to listen for a moment just to check he's not talking to anyone else, and then I'm going to ask him for a quick radio check. Radio checks aren't strictly necessary, but quite often people have problem with their kit, their headphones, something's happened to the settings in their pilot client, and it's better to find out earlier rather than later that you can't hear each other. I think it also draws attention to you as someone that's just arrived and is about to do something on Vatsim, so the controller sort of brings their focus to you. As with all communication, particularly for the initial call, keep it as short and brief as you possibly can. So it's their call sign, your call sign, then what it is you want. Liverpool radar, good afternoon. Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie, radio check.
Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie, Liverpool radar, good afternoon, readability 5.
Have you readability 5 also? Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie. Readability is an overall assessment of the quality of the sound. Some people talk about 5 by 5, and in which case they're talking about loudness and clarity. But generally speaking, on Vatsim in the UK, we talk about readability now. So 5's very good quality. You might hear a controller put "how me" on the end of their reply, inviting you to assess their quality as well. Now I'm going to ask the controller for permissions to start up. VFR traffic that's on a small aerodrome might well in the real world not ask for permission to start up. I've asked a couple of real world pilots what they think about this. One said he basically never asked to start up, and the other said that he would always ask for permission if there is IFR traffic around and it's a controlled aerodrome, because you don't know, maybe you might be just stuck on your parking spot for 10 minutes while IFR traffic taxis across in front of you, and you don't want to be sat there burning fuel if it's not necessary. And when I call up for an engine start, I also say what I'm going to be doing, so VFR departure to wherever. The reason why I do that is if you're talking to a ground controller, once you've spoken to them, they then go off and in their private chat room talk to a higher up controller and start getting your clearance organised. So I think the earlier you do that, the better, particularly if they're busy. Otherwise you might be sat around for a while they get it sorted. Cap 413 says that at certain aerodromes you'll also give the location of the aircraft and the ATIS letter and the QNH when you ask for a startup. Obviously in the real world, if you're not asking for startup, you'd give that information when you call in for taxi. Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie is a Cessna 152 on the GA parking with information hotel, QNH 1022, request start for VFR circuits.
Golf Romeo Charlie Roger, startup is approved, clearance will be at the hold, sting taxi holding point kilo, and report ready for further taxi.
Clearance will be at the hold, start approved, taxi to kilo, and then report ready for taxi. Golf Romeo Charlie. This is a slightly unusual situation because at Liverpool, because the GA apron is outside of their responsibility, this controller, who really knows his stuff, has told me basically to go to kilo, just on my own, and then to report that I'm ready to taxi beyond that, because that's the licensed aerodrome. At most aerodromes, when you request taxi, you'll just simply be given the full set of instructions up to a holding point just before the departure runway. Often, particularly if a controller is busy, they will watch your progress across the aerodrome, and then just before you get to the limit of your taxi clearance, they will call you and tell you what to do next. So you might not actually have to call in when you get to that point. In this example, I receive the taxi clearance to go up to the departure runway and then to hold and then to report ready for clearance. And what he means by that is when I'm ready to write down the information that I need for my departure route from the aerodrome.
Golf Romeo Charlie, continue taxi, holding point Golf for runway 27, report ready for clearance.
Taxi to Golf for runway 27 and report ready. Golf Romeo Charlie. So you've probably figured out there are different clearances that you will receive in a flight. You'll get your taxi clearance, so where to go to and how to get there, and you mustn't go beyond that point. Then you've got your departure clearance. That's information about what runway you'll depart on and what the route out of the zone will be, what altitude restriction there is, what the QNH is, and what the squawk will be. And then later on you'll receive your takeoff clearance, so that's permission to go onto the runway and take off. That's the only time you'll hear the words takeoff used. Up to that point we talk about the departure rather than the takeoff, so there's no confusion. At holding point Golf now, I call in and say that I'm ready to copy. That means I'm sitting there with a bit of paper and a pen and I'm ready to write down the departure information that he's about to give me. Golf Romeo Charlie, ready to copy.
Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie, hold position north to departure runway 27 in the left-hand visual circuit, at above altitude 1,500 feet VFR, QNH 1022, squawk 7010.
Hold position. After departure, left-hand visual circuits not above 1,500 feet VFR, QNH 1022, squawk 7010. Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie.
Golf Romeo Charlie, correct, report ready for departure.
So first of all he says hold position. So to make it very clear, this is not a permission to start moving and taking off. You are to hold your position. Then he gives the departure information. So what runway to go off, what the altitude restriction is, the QNH and the squawk. Once I've read that back correctly, he then says report ready for departure. Now you might want to do some run-up checks. In this case I've already done them before I called in to say I was ready to copy. You certainly need a moment to set your squawk into the transponder. If you're planning on using an autopilot, it might take a moment to set that up. But basically you need to get everything absolutely ready, switch on your strobes and your lights, everything completely ready to go before you say you are ready for departure. As soon as you say that and he tells you to go, you need to get on the runway and take off as quickly as you can. In this example, because I had already completed my run-up checks, I'd already set my lights, I already knew what the squawk was going to be, so I'd entered that ready to go. So I reply straight away to say that I am actually ready for departure. Roger, I'm ready for departure now. Golf Romeo Charlie.
Golf Romeo Charlie, Roger, with the left-hand turn out runway 27, take off point 0, 80 degrees, 8 knots.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 27, Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie. Then to clarify, he reiterates that it's going to be a left-hand turn out, left-hand circuits. Gives me information about the surface winds, and then I read back to say that I've understood it. Once in the air, the next call is on the downwind leg, and this is to report your position and your intentions. And that means Are you doing a full stop landing, or are you doing touch and go? If you report your downwind position but don't say what you're going to do, the controller might come back and say report intentions, and that's what they want to know. The downwind call should ideally be made when you are abeam the departure end of the runway, but if the controller is busy, you might struggle to sort of squeeze that call in. So if you end up making it later than the ideal, you could announce that you are late downwind rather than downwind.
Got your report in the head, Kerry, and we'd like a charting service if possible, and if you could just let Manchester know we'll be heading to London, that'd be great. Golf Alpha November.
Golf Alpha November, understood, and I'll make that for you.
We appreciate it.
Golf Romeo Charlie, downwind 27, touch and go.
Golf Romeo Charlie, Roger, report final runway 27, number 1.
Report final 27, number 1, Golf Romeo Charlie. In this example, I'm able to call in at the correct time. Hopefully at this point the controller will give you permission to make your base turn and turn on to final, so they will just tell you to report final, and they will give you your position in the circuit queue. So in this case I'm number 1, there's no traffic ahead of me. But if there is someone already coming into land, or there's IFR traffic coming in, it's possible you might be asked to do a right-hand orbit in this case, so away from the circuit direction at the end of your downwind leg, or they might ask you to extend your downwind leg just to delay your approach to give the incoming traffic room to land. So once on final, that's the next call. If you are further than 4 miles out for some reason, it's a long final approach, but in circuits you probably won't be.
Traffic service, Liverpool QNH 108.
Charlie service, Golf Alpha November.
Golf Romeo Charlie, final 27, touch and go.
Golf Romeo Charlie, runway 27, clear touch and go, surface wind 080 degrees, 8 knots.
Clear touch and go, runway 27, Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie.
Golf India Kilo behind the...
So remember at this stage to read back correctly what it is you've been cleared for. So if your intentions are touch and go, and you are cleared for touch and go, you must read back that you are cleared for the touch and go, not cleared to land, because that's a different thing. And other traffic in the pattern will be listening to your calls, and if you are reporting that you're going to land and you've actually been cleared up to that point to touch and go, that causes confusion, and traffic behind you might need to go around because all of a sudden you've said that you're going to land. After the touch and go, I go round the circuit again, but this time I'm going to come into land, so on the downwind call it's slightly different. Golf Romeo Charlie, downwind 27 to land.
Golf Romeo Charlie, rushing report final runway 27 number 1.
Report final for 27 and number 1, Golf Romeo Charlie. But I'm still number 1. Golf Romeo Charlie, final 27 to land.
Golf November Charlie, Roger, runway 270 clear to land, wind 070 degrees, 7 knots.
Runway 27 clear to land, Golf Hotel Echo Romeo Charlie. After landing, you don't need to make any calls until you are vacated from the runway, and that means you are off the runway onto a taxi lane and you are beyond the hold. So you mustn't call in to say you vacated until you've crossed that hold. Sometimes what happens though, ironically, if the controller is busy, they might just call into you to give you your next instruction almost before you're ready, and as soon as they see you're vacated off the runway. But it might be that the controller is very quiet and you're the only traffic they're dealing with, in which case they're probably watching you go round. So if you haven't heard from the controller, stop after the yellow line of the hold, get your aircraft sorted, get your flaps up, strobes off, etc., and then call in to say you vacated and to request taxi. But in this case, he sees me vacate the runway and he immediately calls in to tell me what to do.
Golf India Kilo, Roger, squawk by Charlie for me. And Golf India Kilo, runway 27 clear, touching Dover, 070 degrees, 7 knots.
Clear touch and go, Golf India Kilo.
Golf Romeo Charlie, welcome back. Taxi right Alpha, left Kilo to the GA apron. Have a good one.
Roger, thanks. Vacated onto Echo, taxiing back to GA via Alpha, thanks. Golf Romeo Charlie. And at this point I mess things up completely and I'm so prepared, ready to report my position and whatnot, I do a stupid call. So what I should have said was what's written on the screen here. After you've parked, you're not obliged to say anything. If you were taking part in a group flight on a smaller aerodrome, it might be nice to call in to the controller and report that you're shutting down on chocks. If you're at an uncontrolled aerodrome, it might be nice to tell other pilots that you are parked and you finished taxiing. But in this case, the controller was busy and I didn't report anything at all. So in the next video, we will do a more involved flight, departing from one aerodrome, landing at another, leaving airspace, coming back into it. But that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.